Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Speaking Truth About Power. These are our Friday night conversations during April with some of our strongest and most articulate community leaders talking about a public power utility in Pueblo and what some of the advantages might be. The sessions are hosted by Bring Power Home 2020, the campaign for public power in Pueblo. I'm David Cockrell. I'm the co-chair of the campaign. And tonight, we are honored to have with us three of Pueblo's most beloved spiritual and social justice activists, Sister Nancy Crafton, Ann Stattelman, and Kevin Olsen. Sister Nancy, the founding director of Los Pobres in Avondale, has honored her mother, her upbringing, and her God during the last 50 years as a member of the Sisters of Charity. She joined her order at age 18, already having been accepted as a nursing student. And it was nursing that brought Sister Nancy to Pueblo in 1971. She worked for many years at St. Mary Corwin Medical Center, which was then owned by the Sisters of Charity. But for Crafton, nursing was more than about helping to heal people physically. Her arrival in Pueblo coincided with an exciting time in American history, protests over an unpopular war, but especially about the brave advocate for migrant farm workers, Cesar Chavez. And also, Sister Nancy's new bishop during those days, Charles Buswell, was afire with the spirit of Vatican II and was anxious to put the bold and laity-empowered directives into practice there. Los Pobres, which offers food, used clothing, limited medical care, and other services to migrant workers from a Quonset hut near Sacred Heart Church in Avondale, began in the 1990s. It actually began at the home of Reverend Maurice Gallagher. Also with us is Ann Stattelman. Ann was for 31 years the co-founder and director of Posada, Pueblo's housing agency and homeless services agency. Posada was incorporated in 1987 to address homelessness issues in Pueblo County. And Ann successfully directed the mission of Posada, expanding services and affordable housing in the Pueblo community for 31 years. The agency began by sheltering homeless in homes and in churches. And since its inception, Posada's programs have included strong case management and wraparound supportive services. Posada now focuses its effort on 3 homeless populations: youth, veterans, and families with children. Ann Lee has left, she retired this last year, and she has left an indelible mark on the Pueblo community. Her strong voice advocating for housing rights and for energy reforms enabled Posada to develop from a grassroots organization to Pueblo's preeminent homeless housing and service provider. Reverend Kevin Olsen is an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and has actively served in congregational, evangelical, Lutheran, and Presbyterian churches. In 2014, Reverend Olsen retired from full-time parish ministry and moved to Pueblo with his wife, Jan. Currently, he's a spiritual director with Sacred Journeys, a ministry he started several years ago where he teaches and leads contemplative prayer classes and facilitates discernment processes for many kinds of spiritual seekers. Kevin has been a leader in the local group Faith Leaders in Action and in Together Colorado, a statewide organization dedicated to transforming our public institutions so that they constantly prioritize the voice, participation, governance by, and needs of all God's peoples and God's creation. They're also committed to transforming our economic system to serve the needs and rights of the people and land of Colorado and establishing equity for all Coloradans, particularly those marginalized by race, class, gender, immigrant status, religion, or other forms of oppression. Kevin works to promote social justice, human dignity, and community improvement through faith-based community organizing. He's been a leader in the energy justice movement in Pueblo, and as a colleague of mine in Pueblo's Energy Future, in bringing a background in social and racial justice from the other communities that he served. So, welcome to all three of you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation tonight. It truly is a conversation, and my role will simply be to try to help keep us moving and focused on some questions that we've received from the outside and some that we think are pretty important. I think a good way maybe to kick this off is to ask you all, how were you pulled into helping people with the problems that they've had with Black Hills? What are some of the common characteristics of the people that you've worked with? If you would just talk a little bit about how your work has led you into contact with this kind of a population. And so, who would like to start?
Yeah, I can start, David. I think I need to start because I was invited into this work by Ann and Sister Nancy. Ann invited myself and a couple of other faith leaders, and along with Susan Perkins, to a presentation that was held over at the Eastside Library on this issue. And our local Faith Leaders in Action group was actually kind of searching for issues and for projects that we might be able to adopt and lend a hand on. And so I got involved because of my own passion for social justice work. When I heard about the struggles that this, you might say, oppressive utility company was putting on the low-income community, I figured this was a good opportunity for the faith group to step up, study the issue, and see if we could make structural change, systematic change, first within the city in Black Hills, and if not, then pursue what other options were. So for me, it was an invitation, and it was a natural for the faith community because we do work for human dignity and social justice. And so that's how I got involved, and thanks for the invitation.
And yeah, Annie and I did this together. Go ahead, Ann, start out.
It was in 2009, and Sister would call and could not believe the amount of the electric bills that we were seeing. And we talked to some other folks who were in our continuum of care and decided that we really needed to address this. And in our naivete, we thought we would just go down to Black Hills and talk to them. Sister?
Oh my gosh. We started getting calls for people who were telling us, can you help me? I don't have any electricity. And so we thought, my goodness, what is this? And after Black Hills Energy had been in our lives for a full year, and Los Pobres had been helping people with their utility bills under Aquila and the Board of Water, and we had never seen such cost changes. And so Ann and I, because we have a common thread through Father Gallagher and through the ministry, we're talking and said, there's something very, very wrong here. We have all these shutoffs. So we made an appointment, and we took Catholic Charities, and we went down and we met with Mr. Romero, and we sat around the table and we said, we have a problem here. What's happening? And he told us, we have a new sheriff in town, and this is going to be very difficult, but they are here to make a profit. And we said, but look at all these shutoffs. We're having all these shutoffs every day. We're having more and more shutoffs. And we learned that there were 120 shutoffs a day happening. Right. This was by design. Not only that, but they had absorbed the fees from Aquila of the bad accounts. And they went back 7 years of those bad accounts that were unpaid, and they put them into their system. And they matched the social security numbers of those people in the arrears and added them to the current bills through Black Hills Energy. And so some of our clients would call and say, I have to get a new account because this is a shutoff, I can't pay it. And they told me that I have to pay all of these things with interest from 5 years ago when I had a bad account and I wasn't working, and I can't do it. What is this? So needless to say, we learned a lot about a for-profit investor-owned utility that year. And Ann and I did a dog and pony show, and we tried to go to our city council, to the commissioners, and around with our dog and pony show, trying to tell them, look, we have this is just this month. This is just this month, not 12 years ago, 10 years ago. A shut-off notice for $179. The reconnect fee is $15. It's been lowered from $50. And the deposit is $172, which is reduced from a 3-month deposit of what the person owes. And to get this electricity back on, this person who could not pay his bill is now charged with $366.25. So we tried to explain this. It went nowhere. It went absolutely nowhere. And personally, I learned, and this has carried me through to today, no matter how wonderful the wonderful employees are at Black Hills Energy, they're wonderful Puebloans, and they try to help us as best they can. They are controlled by a corporation whose only motive is profit for their shareholders only. And the thing that lives through the most right now that I cannot get over with is one of the 2 years into this, I got a call from a father, and he said, "Sister, I need help." And he said, I came home today and I have no electricity. I have a wife, I have 3 children. I called them and they said that I would have to pay my bill. And I said, well, can you tell me a little bit about why you're shut off? He said, well, I'm a truck driver, and I've always been able to support my family. There's been nothing that I wouldn't do. I've always been able to support my family. He said, but for the past month, we've been at Children's Hospital with our 4-year-old daughter. She's been sick. My wife has been there at her bedside the whole time. I had to stop making my runs to take care of the children. I lost my pay. I couldn't pay my bills. And I said, could you tell me, how is your little girl? He started to cry. I never, when a man cries, there's just something that just happens. He said, we just buried her. We had to pay for the funeral. And I called Black Hills Energy and I said, I can't pay this bill. I've been at the hospital with my child. We've been there for a month. We just buried her. And I said, what did they tell you? And he said, and he started to cry. He said, the lady said to me, sir, that's not my problem. You have to pay your bill. We will not turn it on until you pay your bill. And that's Black Hills. Profit, profit, profit. We came up with the money, we scrounged for some donations and paid his bill. His bill, his shut off with a 3-month deposit and a 50 reconnect, was $1,200. But his bill, his normal bill would have been $180. $1,200 he had to pay. This is no matter what we've gone through in the last 10 years with this company, no matter how they've tried to tell us that they're helping us, no matter how they've made small arrangements, no matter how they've given out money in little increments to different nonprofits and to the City Fathers and to the Pueblo Chieftain and to everybody else, no matter, they are a for-profit company. They do not really care about our issues. And this is where we are today. Our small nonprofit has done a summary of our payments since we started. We've been in business now 20 years. Our Xcel Energy bills for the last 18 years, when we really were able to start paying bills, was $287,000 in 18 years. And I'm going to show this to you. The Board of Water, which we've been with for 18 years, $110,000. Aquila, which we were with for 6 years, $128,000. We've been with Black Hills Energy for 12 years. We have paid $617,924.66 to get people's electricity on. That's 3 times what anybody else in our city is paying. There's something very wrong here. So Dave, you asked me how we got started. Ann and I got started when all this came to pass, and there's so much more to talk about. So
what a powerful story, and the implications of it for that family and for the community and for the policies. It's really powerful. Ann, would you like to build on that or share some stories from your perspective?
One other thing too, in 2009, Sister and I were also dealing with the Board of Waterworks. And we had a lot of issues with shutoffs with that particular company. And we met with them and we worked with them. And I mean, they changed things because of our stories, because of what was happening. And I mean, almost immediately, so that there was a way that people could stay on. There was a fund that was set up for Board of Waterworks customers that were struggling. And it just really showed the difference between what local control means as opposed to what an investor-owned utility from out of state would do for us. And there's no comparison. And that's what we want, is local control, so that we have people who care about this community and care about the people in the community. And that's what the Board of Waterworks was and is for us.
How did the problems with Black Hills present themselves at the doorstep of Posada?
Well, I think one of the things that our agency has always looked at is, what are the systemic issues? What's causing people to be to our doors? And it was the high utility bills. Many were forced out of public housing, and that was a real problem. At one point, they said that at least 30% of their residents could not obtain housing because they could not get utilities in their name through Black Hills Energy. That's a huge number. And once you are out of public housing, it takes years before you can reapply or get in again. And the other issue is just, if people don't have utilities, they're forced out of their home because they're often evicted. So our goal is to keep people in their homes, to do the prevention work, to keep them there. There wasn't funding. And some of these bills, I don't know the highest bill Sister ever paid, but we've seen bills up to $4,500 that we had to pay before a family could stay in their home. And that was way over what most agencies were used to paying, either through federal assistance or other assistance. So it just, it was just very difficult, and they weren't helpful. You know, it was hard to get somebody on the phone. It was hard to talk with them about a particular family. And fast forward a few years, you know, Black Hills Energy put together its own low-income utility program. And Sister and I were in those conversations with those folks. And they didn't listen to our recommendations because what we really wanted to see was money for at-risk populations, such as the disabled and the elderly. And that still has not happened. And we know in Pueblo that the disabled sometimes pay more for an electric bill than they do for their rent. And they often have no control over how they use electricity because they might need it for whatever, for an oxygen machine or other machines. It's really just heartbreaking. And you walk into some of these homes, if you've been into a home that hasn't had electricity for months, it's horrifying. And they're doing the best they can. You know, Sister will tell you how much food is wasted, you know, when refrigerators are off because they have no electricity, or that families have to shop and just be able to fill their little container with ice. So they have to go to 7-Eleven or wherever it is because they can't keep large quantities of food. And it's a real hardship and a burden. Not to mention kids not being able to do homework at night, have access to internet, you name it. The effects are just horrible. Sister?
Well, yeah, and the issues here, we have a high poverty level in our city, which hasn't been really taken into consideration. And I always felt that the powers that be within our city didn't really want to hear about the poor. We had a hard time getting traction with any of them. It wasn't until the small businesses, the bakeries, had to start paying these huge amounts of money, and they had to pay them sometimes in 2 increments because they just they could not pay their bills. $700, you know, in a bakery that had been something less than that before. And when they started this program where they say, oh, well, we're going to do this low income thing, we said, oh God, this is great. The PUC is actually doing something for us. Well, we found out that they were charging $17, 31 cents on the households and $1.20 on others, right on our bills. We were paying for this program. They were charging us to pay for the program that they were told they had to do for our low income people. And so after all the applications were done, they said, okay, this person has a bill for $100. We're going to have her pay $40. We're going to put the $60 over here. But she has to pay it every month on time. If she misses one day or one payment, all the $60 that we put away are going to go on to the next bill with a shutoff. They're going to get us coming and going. They have people working within that corporation who study rules and regulations, and they go to the nth degree of what it is in order for them to make a profit. Make a profit. Make a profit. So there's a wonderful YouTube video right now on one of our clients, he named and shown, that has been done, a 2-year problem with dear Michael Tannehill. It's under his name, YouTube video, Michael Tannehill. For 2 years, this man who is oxygen dependent, a COPD hardcore veteran, had no electricity, and he was running a generator and having to start it and to go out, and it's just amazing. And he called the city commissioners, and one of their wonderful secretaries called, but she was frustrated, and this helped us because this wonderful secretary for one of the commissioners had to deal with Black Hills Energy. She got nowhere. And she couldn't believe it because she was calling from the office of the county commissioners. So she called me, she said, I don't know what to do. This guy, a $1,200 bill. And I said, I can put 600 on it. Can you call anybody else and get 600 more? So she said, I'll let you know. She called everywhere. Nobody could call. All the agencies that were stressed out, they couldn't do it. So I went down to Black Hills. I put 600 on it that day. The next morning, she said, I've had no luck. All the funds that are given to us for the state have been used. Nobody has any money. So the mailbox came. And in the mailbox, there were 3 checks. And they equaled the exact amount of money that this man needed to get his electricity on. The $1,200. Another 2 years without electricity.
Yeah.
Profit. Come on, you guys. It's profit. You got to know it's all about profit for shareholders who are wealthy and they live a far away. They have charmed lives. And I keep wondering, are there people here in Pueblo that have become part of this shareholder problem that we can't get any traction here? What is this? What is this? What is this? This is ridiculous. And another thing are disabled people. You know, when you are a stage 4 COPD, you have a permanent disability. A permanent disability. We have people with permanent disabilities. They have to get an order from their doctor that says they need to have their electricity on. And that order, which is hard to do, is only good for 60 days with 1 extension. They should have a sheet here that says this person is permanently disabled and in need of electricity, so that when they cannot pay their full amount, they will never get turned off. Doesn't happen. So when I first encountered this with a little lady who needed some help, I marched down there and I went into the office and I said, okay, tell me, what is the problem here? This lady has oxygen. She's never going to be better. She's going to die. She's got to have oxygen. And the little girl said, sister, the reason you have to do it this way is because Black Hills is afraid that if the person dies and the family doesn't tell them, they'll keep using that excuse to get a deferment on their payment. I said, oh my God, what in God's name is this? This is a profit investor-owned problem. And we
sister,
have lived with it for 12 years.
Right. And sister, I think one thing that we found out is that even though we're one of the poorest of Black Hills territories, we're one of the most lucrative, which is why they're fighting so hard to keep us. But over the years, we've known how they've taken the funds for people who never get their deposits back. We still don't know what's happened there, and nobody has time to look into that. The fact that they take a lease from a family and look down that lease and make sure that anyone on that lease, if they had a prior bill with Black Hills Energy, they're also billed, which is illegal as far as we know. We haven't been able to follow up with that. And again, the undergrounding fees, we've always had a question about that too. But there's so much, we can't keep up with it. We didn't have the funds to pay these bills. That's the bottom line. And so people were becoming homeless and hopeless because they could not pay a simple thing with is an electric bill. And Sister Nancy always says that it is a human right. Electricity is a basic human right in a first world country. And we can't forget that.
Well, you shared some amazing stories, and you're painting a picture of a pretty heartless and completely profit-oriented company for sure. And I just want to make sure our viewers know that the story that Sister Nancy just described about Michael Tannehill is available for anyone to watch. Bring Power Home 2020 has a YouTube channel. So if you Google YouTube and then you get on there and you just search Bring Power Home 2020, you can watch the story of Michael Tannehill and see him trying to fire up his generator to keep his oxygen machine running. And so, Reverend Olsen, let me bring you into this, and I guess what I'd like to ask you is, we're getting a picture of how the Black Hills rigidity and profit orientation has impacted Los Pobres and Posada. Can you talk a little bit about how you see it having impacted the Pueblo's church community? We know now how many ministers have signed on as endorsers and supporters of 2A. And I'd like to hear more about why and how these folks with Black Hills problems have impacted our churches.
Yeah, sure, David. A couple of things I want to add, not that I really need to add on to Sister Nancy or Ann's stories. I have a short one myself. One of our congregations had one of their members come to them, and they had a $1,500 past due bill, and they'd been shut off. And it was because of medical issues, actually a car accident, and they too were in the hospital for a short time. And so the church had the money, not a lot of this kind of money. As a matter of fact, I'll just say that a lot of the congregations in Pueblo support both Posada and Sister Nancy's ministries. And so a lot of, we're not the front lines of this. And so we've referred people to Sister Nancy, to Ann, to all the safety net organizations in town. They're better able to handle these than we are. But every now and then a church will have some money available to help. And so this congregation did help. They went in, physically went in, paid the bill, got current, and the lady moved out of her apartment and moved into another apartment. And she needed a new deposit. And she had a history of one past due bill, so they made her have a new deposit. So she got a deposit. Well, the utility company didn't change the fact that she was no longer the resident in that apartment, and the next resident didn't pay his bill, and guess who got billed? So they shut her off again in her new apartment, and she was forced to pay the person who was living in her apartment. And it was a fiasco, an absolute nightmare trying to unwind that. It took several months, and the pastor actually moved out of Pueblo, so I never was able to find out how that turned out. But that's the kind of practices that they do. If there's somebody who owes them money, they will go back and back and back to find somebody who has the ability to pay, or the electricity is shut off. And most people, especially low-income people, they don't have the means to fight a utility company or to take them to court, and that's a problem. So, it's all about, for me and the faith community, we've had many conversations at Faith Leaders in Action and say, what can we do? And so we've supported this movement to try to change the systems and structures. At first, we were naive, like Ann and Sister Nancy, thinking we can march into Black Hills, the faith community, all of us together, along with Pueblo's Energy Future in its infancy, and say, we've got a problem, folks. And it's hurting Pueblo. It's hurting the low-income community. The business community is suffering. People are being oppressed. We need to change some things. So we went to the city, and the city appointed Larry Intencio to be a liaison between Pueblo's Energy Future and Black Hills Energy to try to get a few of these policies, simple policies like the deposits changed, to get a hot weather rule, and to try to get Black Hills Energy to participate in past due bills by saying, instead of being punitive, we suggested that you take on a policy like the state of Massachusetts, where if you incentivize somebody to pay their electric bill. So if they had a past due bill of $600, and you say, we're going to put you on a payment plan of $50 a month, the energy company would say, well, if you pay $50, we'll match your $50, so that this bill will get paid off in a short period of time. And that's an incentive versus the kind of stuff that goes on now, which is punitive. It's punitive.
And let me just add, Kevin, that you and I and many others spent hours going over best practices in all kinds of states for all kinds of ways that consumers could be supported. And I don't know if they've ever looked at any of those reports, but I mean, we put our goals into those.
Yeah, the only thing I can say, Ann, is I think it was at the very last meeting where we tried to negotiate with them, and then it finally got all shut off. They stopped negotiating, stopped talking with us. And basically, I think the most honest thing they said, and it was the previous manager, Chris Burke, said to us, and I think this was coming from the top. I don't think it's what Chris had the authority to do, but he said, you know, we'll look into this, and you've heard that story many times. We'll look into this cost sharing idea. But he said, whatever we do, it has to be revenue neutral. Bingo. That was the key word to me, meaning they are not going to take any kind of reduction in revenue in their rates or any other thing. It has to be revenue neutral before they would even consider it. Well, that tells me that they don't give a hoot, like Sister Nancy said, about the people in Pueblo. It's all about them. It's about their money and the amount of money they want to continue to pull out of this. And so, you know, you've all heard of the Good Samaritan story, I'm sure. Even people who may not be of the faith, you know, involved in faith communities. The Good Samaritan story. Just think about this, Sister Nancy. Black Hills Energy is willing to spend, or their contributors, and it's a big mystery who that is, $700,000 to $1.5 million to win this election. And you've spent $600 and some thousand over a 10-year period of hard-earned money that people give to your organization to support the people that's down in the gutter, like the person in that Good Samaritan story. And what do? They just walk by. They walk by the people in the gutter. Totally.
You know, Kevin, we're in a pandemic. We are in a crisis situation, yet they are pouring money into this small community. This huge gorilla is looking at this little tiny rabbit, pouring money into. There has to be a reason of why they're pouring all this money into this little tiny community who is struggling with unemployment, with poverty, with homelessness. To what? To keep their money flowing north, west, south to their investors? There's got to be something here that we don't see. We don't see it. There's something very wrong here. And it's unconscionable. It's just so unconscionable, all that money. And I keep thinking, you know, we could be putting people into hotels. We could be putting people into little rooms and paying their rent for them. If we had that kind of money and they're holding us hostage, and where are these people coming from? I don't recognize any of them. They're not from Pueblo. They're from out of state. Where are these people coming from that are doing this to us? What is this? And there's signs. It's just so disheartening.
And I think too, you know, and also the other part of this is that not only are nonprofits paying for people's bills, we're also trying to pay our own bills. And with the demand structure, it's been really difficult for agencies like Posada, who I used to be with. The fact that, you know, your demand payment was half of your bill. And then maybe you'll get a grant from Black Hills Energy, but that doesn't even cover your demand fees for one project for a year. So it's too little. And they're making a lot of money off the backs of the poor in our community, and it's that simple. Not just the poor, but our entire community, and they're stifling economic growth, which also impacts our populations.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
No, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, and I can add to that because that is one of the issues that several of our congregations have brought to my attention because they knew I was working on this. One of our more prominent congregations in town spends about between $30,000 and $32,000 a year for electricity, and that's a lot of money for a church. Half of that is the demand charge. So just think about that. You know, $15,000 to $16,000 is demand charge, and it's all caused by when churches open up on a hot sunny Sunday morning in August and they flip on their air conditioners. That's what creates the demand. And it's one thing to have a demand charge, but it's another thing to have that charge set for a full 12 months before it can be changed. And that's just outrageous.
You know, the Black Hills position has been, and I think it's a position that really is important for us to examine, that Southern Colorado really is a high poverty region. And the poverty that we experience here clearly impacts our ratepayers' ability to meet their obligations. And so many people on fixed incomes, low wage jobs, no benefits. And the claim is that the high level of disconnects and the problems are not so much the company's problem. They are a structural element of our region, our communities and our region. And I just wonder, you mentioned this earlier, I wonder if you could say a little more. I mean, are there examples of investor-owned utilities in other regions who have a compassionate, more flexible policy structure that you believe would mitigate these issues, or is it truly the poor will always be with us, and there's really never going to be any real relief from the disconnects because these customers don't have the ability to pay their bills?
You know, if you look, David, at other states and how utility commissions have worked there, Iowa is a really good example. You know, Black Hills is in Iowa. They don't get the kind of increases that Black Hills has gotten here. So that's an issue. You know, Black Hills came into the Aquila territory. Obviously, there was infrastructure that needed to be upgraded. But they knew that going in, and they knew that this was going to benefit shareholders, and that's what we're paying for. You know, all of us as a Black Hills Energy client pay for their infrastructure. That's just the way it's set up. An IOU is not going to work for Pueblo County. There's no doubt about that, or the city of Pueblo. And I think that's been said over and over and over again. There are definitely examples of utility companies that have very smart and effective ways to deal with people who can't pay their bills. Black Hills Energy has not looked into any of those. There is great work that's being done in Maryland especially, and all that information was forwarded to our company, Black Hills Energy. They weren't interested in looking at it at all. And sure, we will always have the poor, we will have people who still won't be able to pay their bills. But if our utility is locally owned, we have access to that utility. We do not have that option right now.
Yeah, I can add a little bit, David, in that I honestly believe that it's a corporate culture as well as it is a low income issue. Corporations can choose to be compassionate. They don't have to be greedy. They don't have to be punitive. You know, they don't have to be predatory. It's a choice that they can make, and they can still make a profit, a fair profit, and have fair. I think there's a huge difference between Black Hills Energy and XL Energy and how they treat customers. And that's the only other investor-owned electric utility in the state. And I've lived in places, I lived in Denver where my electric utility was XL Energy. And although I wasn't involved as I am now, you know, there weren't the kind of complaints that you hear that we do in Pueblo. And the other part is I think there's corporations that actually look for communities that are weak from the standpoint of, you know, they're not big enough to really have the kind of power that a big city might have. with the kind of paid people you need to really keep an eye on the franchise agreement and an eye on the utility company. You know, our city council members are paid a pittance, and sometimes you get the results of that. That we don't have the expertise. And now that we have a new mayor system, I think we're really trying to change the culture in Pueblo to say, you do have the power to do something. We can do something. You need to stand up and do something. And it's time for Pueblo to do that. We've given up on Black Hills Energy to change their corporate culture. They can only do that themselves. We've tried to get them to do it, and it hasn't worked. So it's both and. It's the city itself and all of us residents. It's time for us to stand up and say we've had enough, and that's what we're doing. And it's also time to look at other options. And we think by having you know, a public power utility, we have a lot more control over what happens with all of us. Low-income community, the business community, our churches, everyone, we will have more say than what we have now. And that, I don't know if you can put a price on that. I don't think you can put a price on that.
So, Sister Nancy, is electricity a basic human right that everyone should have access to? Or is it a privately consumed product like a loaf of bread that either you pay for it up front or you don't have it?
Right now in America, it is not a right. Just like healthcare is not a right. And it should be a right, because we can't live, we can live without electricity if we all go back to wood burning and you know, the old ways. But we make our houses have to be electrified. They have to have refrigerators. They have to have things that are electricity is absolutely necessary for. We can't live without it. We have made it this way. America has made it this way. Other first world countries have made it this way. So to allow a for-profit company to control the release of that energy to a world, this is wrong. This is very, very wrong. It has to be a right. People who are disabled should not have to pay for their electricity. People who are on fixed incomes should not have to pay for their electricity. It should be worked into the system that they get their electricity and they have it. They should not be evicted from their homes because they don't have electricity. It should be a right. There's no, I mean, there is no question. It has to be a right. I don't know if we'll ever get that across. We have a corrupted capitalism at this point in time. Just look at what's happening with our country right now, with the increase in taxes for the very wealthy, the offshore investments that are going on. This something has to give. Possibly the pandemic is going to be the source of a big change of how things are done in America. It's never going to be the same again. Never going to be the same again. But and Black Hills Energy is going to fight to the death because they want to get their money no matter what. And they will be working. They are working so hard to keep us in their grip. And this is wrong. What they are doing in our country, in our city right now with this advertising campaign it's unethical and it's wrong and it's not right. They're telling terrible stories. So anyhow, I digress. But yes, it should be a right. It should be a right. Life should be a right. Oh my God.
And would you like to speak?
Joseph?
Well, I just think again, you know, it's not a right. I mean, it is an absolute necessity in a first world country. That's just the way it is. Unless we want to have permanent distinctions between the haves and the have-nots. You know, everybody needs access to reliable and affordable electricity. We do not have that right now in the city of Pueblo.
You don't think it's a right, Ann?
Oh, I do think it's a right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't come across clearly. No, it's definitely a right. And it, as you said, in a first world country. But I'm not saying it's not only a right, it's a necessity.
Yes.
You know, you can't make it without electricity in this country, right? For a number of reasons.
So correct, so correct, so correct. Yes. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How can Mr. Flores and Mr. Atencio stand up there and say the things that they say? Mr. Atencio was the one that signed the contract 12 years ago. He's the signer on that contract. They are responsible for what came here to us. It was a terrible mistake, and we've lived with it. They have to own up to it. There's something very, very wrong. I'd like to say evil, but it's wrong. There's something very wrong here. And to tell Puebloans, with this company, if you go for this, it's going to be a government company, and you aren't going to be able to vote for the pay raises. What's, you know, come on. We don't vote for raises now. Why are they? This is wrong. This is evil. This is pure evil.
You know, one more. We're coming to the end of our time together, I think, and but there's one more question I'd like to get out there that I think is on a lot of viewers' minds, and that is that in 2018, as part of the charm offensive that Black Hills has mounted to rebuild the company's reputation, the company changed its disconnect reconnection policies. It reduced the reconnection fee, as Sister Nancy mentioned, from $50 to $15, and it reduced the deposit that was required.
Mm-hmm.
They also instituted a policy of budget billing, allowing a kind of a graduated repayment structure of the amount due. And there's mixed results so far about the impact that that's had on the actual disconnect rates. And I just wonder if you all think that those policy changes have made a real difference. I think a lot of people wonder if that maybe was enough of a change on the part of the company to correct the injustices that they've perpetrated over the years.
You know,
Well,
David, sorry, you know, disconnects have not changed very much over time, over the last 3 years for sure. And the last quarter of 2019, almost 1,800 people were disconnected. That's about as high as it is any quarter. So in 2019, about 6,663 households were disconnected. What does that mean? That means that refrigerators don't work. That means their kids can't do their homework. That means they might have to stop work to pay a bill. It's different for every family, but it hasn't changed much because the rates haven't changed. That's what it comes down to. The rates are too high for people to pay. And we asked for all of those things 12 years ago, and they didn't do a thing about it until municipalization was on the table. So that tells you what their motivation is. And as far as I'm concerned, it also says that a tiger doesn't really change its stripes.
And the process that they put in, they did change it, but they're really clever. What they said is, if you pay 50% of your shut off, and I have one right here, I just did this, it's 2 weeks old, okay, and they wrote a nice letter to this dear man, and they said, you promised to pay $485, and we said that if you pay 50% of your bill, we will keep you on, and every week you have to pay the rest of it. So if he couldn't pay it, and every week after that he has to make a payment on it, where's that money going to come from in a month's time? They get paid once a month maybe. So the way they think is not the way of life. So if you get a paycheck and you're going to pay this huge chunk. His bill was $800. So they said, okay, you can pay this much, but on the 6th, on the 15th, and on the 6th of next month, you have to pay this, 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 and this. It can't be done. If they, how do they expect it to have it 1 week after the other? This is the problem. They don't think like we think, or like we live, or like we exist. There's something, there's a mentality here that does not compute with humanity. So this dear little man, we went down and we did, and the people there are they are good. They are good Puebloans working there. They can't change anything, but they're very kind, and I've never had any problems with them. They call me, can you help? They're good people. They cannot do anything about what's coming down from the corporation. For profit, investor owned, shareholder riches. We have to keep saying that. This is what they are. They will always be this. And if they get another 10 years with us, it's not going to be any better.
Okay. I would like to, this has been a fabulous conversation. And I think we've heard a lot about the injustices and the policies that have been so challenging and such a disconnect with our community over a long period of time now. I want to give you all a chance here right at the end. If there's anything else that you'd like to offer, any other kind of statements about issues that we haven't had a chance to discuss, take a minute now and share with us your closing thoughts and your final considerations.
For me, David, I think it's the fact that it's not just a low income issue. This speaks to the entire economic strength of Pueblo going forward. And until our businesses pay less for electricity, we're not going to be able to expand. And I just think a local utility, possibly with the Board of Waterworks at the helm, really will care about Pueblo people. And that's really what it's about. We're going to have challenges, there's no doubt, but we need a company that is flexible and actually is concerned about the progress and our community. That's it.
Yeah, I can say something here, David. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah, I've always felt like after spending almost 6 years on this effort myself, along with a lot of other people in town, some very smart people, and some help from people that really know this business, that I really feel like the cost of doing nothing is going to be a lot higher than the cost of creating a new public power utility. And I also want to challenge the community, because I think it's time for Pueblo to change the narrative from we can't do anything, it's too costly, you know, this and that. It's time to bring the power home. It's time to bring the money home. You know, $120 million, just think of once a month, $10 million, you load it up in a Brinks truck and it heads north. That's about how much revenue they take out of Pueblo. Some of that comes back, there's no question, in salaries, but that's how much money just the city of Pueblo sends Black Hills Energy a year, about $120 million. So a Brinks truck a month with $10 million leaves. It's time to bring that money home and put it to work here. It's time to lower our rates, and that might take a little while, but it's possible. And you look at the city of Fort Collins as one of the best model utilities, and it's taken them a while, but if we could get to that point, it would be marvelous for this city and things would change. It's time for the businesses and the residents to be put first instead of the shareholders. And that we can't do with an investor-owned utility, but we can with public power. It's time to own our utility instead of lease it and pay for it. If we keep buying our energy from Black Hills Energy, Every 10 years, we're going to pay for that utility over and over and over. And after 10 years, after 20 years, and if they keep going, you will pay, I don't know how many millions of dollars and end up with nothing. And here's my closing statement. If Pueblo ingenuity and grit can build steel and wire for the Golden Gate Bridge, and that Pueblo can produce some of the best green chilies in this country, and that Pueblo is really the home of heroes, surely Pueblo can create a state-of-the-art electric utility that works for Pueblo, all of Pueblo, the low-income community, the business community, for our hospitals, our educational institutions. There isn't anyone who isn't being oppressed by these rates and these policies. And for those who say it's too expensive and we can't do this, they're not leaders. We can do this. We must do this. Our future depends on it, and the time is now. I am voting yes on 2A. And I know that a lot of the faith community, most of the faith community, is voting yes on 2A because of these policies and practices that are unfair, unjust, and we've had enough.
Amazing statement, Reverend Olsen. Shall we say that the situation looks a little like this?
You got it. We can do this.
It's a pretty scary sumo wrestler. I don't know.
We can do this. We just have to believe in ourselves, and that's something that I hope that this campaign has been all about. We can do this. We knew it would be an uphill battle, and we can do this. We just have to believe, and you have to vote. So get out your ballot right now. If it's sitting on your table somewhere, pick it up and vote yes for 4A.
All right.
2A, not 4A.
Hoorah.
Not 4A, 2A. Mr. Nancy, last word's yours. Although Reverend Olsen's comments were very inspiring.
Yes, Reverend Olsen, you said it all. I just think we have to remind everyone that human beings have a right to live, and to live with electricity. This is an issue that is dear to my heart, and I think that if we just keep remembering, we are all brothers and sisters. No one is better than anyone else. We just have to keep working to see if we can't make this more reasonable for everyone living here, for everyone living in our city. It's just essential that we do this. If we don't do it now, we will have 10 more years, and it'll be more expensive to do it in 10 more years. It has to be done now.
All right. Well, thank you all three so much for a really eloquent and inspirational description of a situation. This has been very eye-opening, and there may be many people in our community that have not been as familiar with these challenges as the way you portrayed them. So thank you very much for this session tonight. Let me close by saying that Speaking Truth About Power is a series. We're doing this every Friday night during April. And next Friday night, April the 24th at 7 p.m., we will be hosting a conversation with former PUC Commissioner Francis Concelia, who will talk about the inside scoop on what it's like to sit on the bench and listen to the Black Hills lawyers and dice through their strategizing through electric resource plans, phase 1 and phase 2 rate cases, and all the other machinations that they present before the Public Utilities Commission. She will be joined for a portion of that session by Sam Craig from Craig Manufacturing and another leader from the manufacturing sector in Pueblo. So please be sure and join us next Friday night for this exciting edition of Speaking Truth About Power. And then there will be one more after that on May the 1st too. And we'll tell you more about that as the time comes. So thanks everyone. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, sister.
You know,
Let's
so
stay on,
what's
and
gonna
they
happen?
can stop the video here.
Yeah.